She sat barefoot on the sidewalk, holding a crumpled drawing, not asking for money, just whispering, "Will you buy my picture?" Everyone passed by, except one man. What he didn't know was that little girl had no name, no home, and believed her family was still waiting for her. But what happened next changed both of their lives forever. The city moved around her, impatient footsteps, honking horns, hurried conversations. But no one noticed the little girl sitting still in the middle of it all. Her dress was a faded green, hanging loosely from her thin frame. Her knees were scraped, her face smudged with dust, and her tiny feet rested against the cold concrete. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. And yet, she looked as if she'd already seen a lifetime. Her name was Ellie. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even reach out. She just sat there, silent and small, holding up a simple wooden frame with a child's drawing inside. 4 stick figures, smiling under a bright yellow sun, 2 tall ones, 2 small ones, holding hands. That was her family. But the family wasn't there anymore. 3 weeks earlier, a car crash had changed everything. Her mother's laughter, her sister's giggles, the warmth of the back seat on a sunny day. It had all disappeared in a blur of fire and flashing lights. The car flipped. Screams echoed. Flames erupted. Ellie had been thrown from the wreck, found unconscious near a guardrail. Somehow, in the chaos, she was missed, unregistered, forgotten. No one claimed her. No one knew she'd survived. So Ellie wandered. First the hospital, then the streets. At night, she curled up near store windows or under awnings. Sometimes kind strangers offered a piece of bread or a bottle of water. But more often, people looked away, confused, uncomfortable, or simply too busy. She didn't understand where to go. All she remembered was what her mother once said, "If you ever get lost, draw us happy. Someone kind will see it and help you come home." So she drew and waited. "Sir, will you buy my drawing?" she whispered hoarsely to a passing man in a gray coat. He didn't stop. She tried again to a woman carrying shopping bags. Nothing. People crossed the street to avoid her. One woman clutched her purse tighter. A businessman muttered something and moved on. Ellie didn't move either. Not when her stomach growled. Not when the wind turned colder. She just held her drawing tighter, as if letting go would mean losing her family all over again. Then someone stopped. A man in his 60s. White hair, tan coat, leather shoes. The kind of man who looked like he had places to be and people waiting for him. But something made him pause. He looked down at the little girl, silent and shivering, then slowly knelt beside her. "You drew that?" he asked gently. Ellie nodded, almost too faint to see. He looked closer at the picture. 4 stick figures, smiling under the sun. Ordinary to anyone else, but the way she held it, like it was sacred, made it extraordinary. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. He tried again, more gently this time. "Where's your mom, sweetheart?" Her lips parted slightly. Her voice came out in a dry, broken whisper. "They died. In the fire." The man's heart stopped, and everything in his world shifted. Charles didn't know why he stopped. He had walked this path 100 times before, same streets, same routines. But that day, something was different. Maybe it was the way she sat, so still, so quiet, on a busy corner that never stopped moving. Or maybe it was her eyes, too wide, too tired, too old for someone so young. They didn't ask for pity. They simply told the truth, raw and aching. He saw the paper first. A simple drawing, smudged and wrinkled, clenched tightly in her tiny fingers like it was the only thing left in the world worth holding on to. 4 stick figures stood beneath a yellow sun, too tall, too small. A family smiling. Together. He felt something in his chest crack. Without a word, Charles knelt beside her, slowly removing his tin coat and draping it over her thin shoulders. She didn't flinch. She didn't resist. She just sat, still holding the drawing, as if it were sacred. He swallowed the lump rising in his throat. "Do you have a name?" he asked gently. She looked at him cautiously, her lips barely moving. "I think, Ellie." He nodded. "That's a beautiful name." She shook her head softly, as if trying to remember something long forgotten. "I don't know my last name," she whispered. "Mommy had brown hair, curly. My sister liked pink juice." It wasn't much, but to her it was everything. Charles felt helpless. The street around them buzzed with life, people brushing past, lost in their own worlds, but here was this child completely alone, and no one seemed to see her. Not really. How could so many people pass by and not stop? He reached for his phone. not to dial 911. He paused for a moment, then tapped the number of someone who had always known what to do in moments like these. "Margaret," he said when she answered. She immediately heard the tremble in his voice. "Charles? What's wrong?" "I found a little girl," he said. "Alone. She's not begging, she's trying to sell a drawing of her family. She says they died in a car fire. I don't know what to do." There was a brief pause on the other end. Then, "Where are you?" 11th and Grant. "Near the cafe." "I'm coming now. Stay with her." Charles ended the call and turned back to Ellie. She had curled up again, the coat sliding down one shoulder. Her eyes were distant, focused on something far away only she could see. 15 minutes later, a small gray car pulled up. A woman with red glasses and a long cardigan stepped out. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She simply walked over, crouched beside the girl, and smiled gently. "I'm Margaret," she said softly. "Can I sit with you?" Ellie didn't speak, but she gave a small nod. Margaret took off her scarf and wrapped it around the girl's bare, cold feet. Then she whispered something so simple, so profound, that it made Charles look away, eyes stinging. "You were so brave. You waited. And now we're here." And for the first time, Ellie's tiny frame relaxed, just a little. Someone had finally stayed. Ellie's new home wasn't just a place, it was a beginning. It wasn't a typical foster house with gray walls and locked doors. No, this was different. It was a child outreach center specially designed for children who had been through trauma. The walls were painted soft shades of blue and yellow, with stars on the ceilings and shelves filled with books and puzzles. The caregivers greeted each child by name, and the room smelled like fresh cookies, not disinfectant. Here, Ellie was no longer a forgotten face on a street corner. She was seen. She was given a small room of her own with a fluffy comforter and a night lamp shaped like a bunny. Her drawings were placed on the wall beside her bed. She had meals at the table with other children, and while she was still quiet, she listened. And most of all, she kept drawing. Every time Charles came to visit, and he always did, he brought her something small. A fresh set of crayons, a new sketchbook, a pack of juice boxes. He never missed a Sunday. And though Ellie still didn't speak much, she would always take the crayons, sit on the floor, and begin to draw. Always four figures. Always holding hands. A family forever frozen in time. Charles never interrupted her process. He'd just sit close by, quietly watching her draw. She was healing in her own way. And he wasn't there to fix her. He was there to stay, no matter how long it took. Then, on a cloudy Thursday morning, something changed. A soft knock echoed in the hallway. A woman in a gray blazer and warm smile held a file in her hand. She approached Charles, who had just arrived for his visit. "We have news," she said, her voice careful but hopeful. Her full name is Ellie Johnson." Charles straightened up. "You found her records?" She nodded. "We matched her fingerprints to a missing persons report from 3 weeks ago. There was a car accident on Route 19. Her parents and younger sister were pronounced dead at the scene." She paused. Ellie was thrown from the car during the crash. She had minor injuries, but in the chaos, no one noticed her. She was never officially reported as found. For weeks, everyone thought she had died, too. Charles was silent. The idea that a little girl had survived all of that and still ended up alone on a sidewalk broke something inside him. "No one claimed her?" he asked quietly. The woman shook her head. "No, but someone wants her now." Charles turned toward the glass window of the activity room. Ellie sat inside, cross-legged on a rug, her head bowed over her latest drawing. It looked like the others, stick figures under a sun. But this time, there were 5 of them. One of them was taller, older, with silver hair and glasses. Charles's breath caught in his chest. That was him. And then Ellie looked up and smiled. Charles never imagined he'd become a father at his age. He was 62 when Ellie came into his life, frail, lost, and barely speaking. At a time when most people were settling into retirement and solitude, Charles was beginning again. Not because he planned it, but because something deep inside him told him he was meant to. Adopting Ellie wasn't a decision he made lightly. The paperwork, the interviews, the home inspections, all of it came with questions he had never thought he'd need to answer. "Are you sure?" people asked. "At your age," they'd whisper gently. But Charles never hesitated. He may not have had children before, but from the moment Ellie reached up and took his hand that first night at the center, he knew this was his daughter. Their life together was simple but full. They lived in a cozy house filled with warmth and books. Ellie had her own art space by the window, with the sunlight pouring in over piles of colored pencils, sketch pads, and paints. She grew up surrounded by love, not loud, over-the-top affection, but steady, unshakable presence. Charles packed her lunches, helped with her homework, and made her cocoa on rainy nights. They planted flowers in the spring, read stories at bedtime, celebrated holidays with handmade decorations. She called him Dad for the first time when she was 9. He cried in the kitchen for an hour afterward. As the years passed, Ellie blossomed. Her art became her voice. She painted scenes filled with memory and emotion, some joyful, some haunted, all powerful. By the time she was in college, she had already held 2 youth exhibitions and had been invited to speak to kids about art therapy. She never forgot where she came from. And she never stopped drawing hands, always holding each other, always reaching out. Charles never missed a show. In every photo taken at her exhibitions, there he stood in the background, tie slightly crooked, beaming with quiet pride. When she graduated, she gave him a painting titled The Man Who Stayed. He hung it in his living room. Then came the day neither of them had expected would come so soon, her wedding day. Charles sat in the front row, a flower pinned to his chest, his hands folded tightly in his lap. As Ellie walked down the aisle in a flowing white dress, he felt the years catch up to him. From the tiny barefoot girl holding a picture on the sidewalk, to the confident woman walking toward her future. All of it flashed before his eyes. She paused halfway down the aisle, turned to him, and reached out her hand. "Walk me the rest of the way, Dad," she whispered. Tears streamed down his cheeks. This wasn't just her wedding day. It was the day he fully realized he hadn't rescued Ellie. She had saved him too. The wedding venue wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. It was warm, filled with soft lights and fresh flowers, and had the kind of gentle beauty that spoke more of love than luxury. The guests filled the rows with excitement buzzing in the air, laughter and whispers echoing softly as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Charles sat in the front row, wearing a perfectly pressed black suit. His white hair had thinned with age, but his eyes held the same quiet strength as the day he found Ellie. In one hand he held a handkerchief. In the other, carefully tucked between his fingers, was a small, worn drawing for stick figures and a yellow sun. The same picture Ellie had clutched when he first met her on that cold sidewalk 20 years ago. Then the music began. Soft, classical notes filled the space. Everyone turned as Ellie appeared at the end of the aisle. She was breathtaking in her white dress, the sunlight dancing off the fabric like it had been made from clouds. Her smile was calm, grounded, full of something deeper than happiness, gratitude. But something unexpected happened. Instead of walking straight to the groom, Ellie walked to the stage. A murmur of confusion passed through the crowd, but it faded as she reached for the microphone and faced the audience. The room fell silent. She took a breath, then turned her eyes to the front row. "To him, to my father," she began, voice steady. "Before I say I do, I need to thank the man who made this day even possible." Charles sat up straight, stunned. His hand tightened around the drawing. "Not the man I'm marrying," she continued, her voice thick with emotion, "but the man who found me when I had nothing, who stopped when everyone else walked by, who wrapped me in his coat when I was cold, who didn't ask me to be anyone but myself." Charles felt his heart swell. Around him, people started to cry. "He gave me more than shelter. He gave me my name back, my voice, my future." She smiled through her own tears. "He gave me a home when I didn't know what that word even meant." She stepped down from the stage and walked straight toward Charles. "He showed me how one act of kindness can change a life." Then she took his hand and pulled him gently to his feet. "I have one more vow to make today," Ellie said, turning to the guests. "Not just to my husband, but to the man who raised me. To you, Dad." She faced Charles, eyes shimmering. "I vow to carry your kindness into every child I help, every painting I create, every life I touch. Everything I am is because you believed in me before I even knew how to believe in myself." The entire room rose in a standing ovation, but Charles didn't hear the applause. He only saw her, his little girl all grown up. He pulled her into a tight hug and whispered, "You are always mine." Sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to walk away to change a life forever. Ellie may have lost everything that day on the sidewalk, but because one man cared enough to stop, she gained not only a future, but a father. If this story touched your heart, Don't forget to give a thumbs up, subscribe for more inspiring and emotional stories, and share it with someone who believes in the power of love and second chances. Speech balloon and tell us in the comments, has anyone ever changed your life with a simple act of kindness? We'd love to hear your story. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never underestimate what one moment of compassion can do.